Oh boy. Hi everyone, Super Hot Tano here, the internet's busiest music nerd. And it's time for a review of the new Peste Noire record, Chaise-Dyable. Ugh, and I'm partially French. This is the latest full-length LP from the loud, eccentric, versatile, and sometimes offensive black metal project Peste Noire. Fronted by singer, songwriter, multi-instrumentalist, composer, in a sense, Famine, who has worked with a handful of different musicians over the course of this project's lifespan, a lot of whom have ties to some pretty prominent French black metal acts. However, don't assume this project is very just blissful, atmospheric. The indie kids, they love the atmospheric black metal. It's just so hot right now. Hot. Much more like traditional black metal, Peste Noire's approach to the style is just very harsh, unforgiving, aggressive. You have the tremolo pick guitars, the blast beats, the wretched vocals, but I think the similarities kind of stop there in a way. Even with this project's debut LP and the few albums that followed it, Peste Noire had a pretty straightforward black metal sound, but still there was something kind of freakish and weird about it. The shrieking over-the-top vocals, and then we have some of the folk instrumentation that would end up on these records. Then in 2011, Peste Noire stopped blurring the line between experimentation and black metal purity and just smashed it with this LP. This thing has a title I believe translates to the pure essence or maybe odor of garbage. And maybe for some who didn't like this album, it was exactly that. But for me, it was kind of this theatrical, schizophrenic, avant-garde black metal album, bringing in elements of not just black metal, but folk music and French medieval music and classical music, as well as industrial and some kind of danceable beats too. This thing was chaotic and noisy, yet the production was way cleaner than any previous album from this project. It was very just, a bit of a mess, but also refined and sounding really nice. I mean, there were legit classical musicians brought in to perform on this record. Though I did mention it at the time, I was kind of hesitant to praise it, but in retrospect, I think I can call this album modern black metal's most enjoyable clusterfuck. To me, this album, even though it hasn't received a whole ton of praise from the black metal community, I think it is a bit of a high watermark in Peste Noire's discography. Now, the following self-titled album that came out after this LP, it contained a lot of the same experimental elements, but in just much more straightforward songs and just more lo-fi production. It was kind of a bit of a return to form for Peste Noire, but still the changes that the project had undergone on the last album were still very much there. And that kind of brings us to this new LP over here, which kind of sounds like a lot of the same experimentation with folk instrumentation from the last two albums, as well as some very hard-hitting, straightforward black metal on this LP, but with just higher quality production. It seems that making just like seriously freakish, long-winded, indulgent, and and noisy metal was just kind of a bit of a detour. Maybe this project will kind of go back to that eventually. But this new LP over here, while it is enjoyable, it's not anywhere near as diverse or surprising instrumentally or stylistically. You're getting guitars, vocals, drums, some keys on here too, all condensed into about 8 tracks or so. Even though this is a more straightforward black metal sound, Peste Noire is definitely still very animated when it comes to the performance of these tracks. And this sound overall, I mean, I kind of anticipated it because it's roughly the same direction that the project was going in on a recently released EP. The title track off which actually appears on this album over here, but it's like a different version. The opening track on this thing is like an acoustic cut with some fluttering electric guitar leads and these very gruesome, cartoony, retched and gargled and grumbled vocals, all in French. I don't know French. But reading into the titles of these tracks, you can kind of get a grip of what exactly is being addressed or sung about over the course of this album, whether it be sort of government overthrow or the devil or wine, a couple other things. And even though this acoustic intro with these strange vocals, it's a little bit silly. Considering Peste Noire's recent output, it's really kind of fitting. And this could be a good thing, this could be a bad thing, depending on kind of your taste for black metal, but all the oddity on the record, at least for a good span of time, is kind of just all thrown out right here in the intro track, because as soon as we get into the second song here, we're just straight into some quickly strummed chords, some blast beats, great melodies too. Just really evil, dark, sinister, sick stuff! The vocals, the guitars, the drums, the performances of these instruments on these tracks is ferocious. It's nasty. It's brutal. And again, even though it is straightforward, kind of like the early stuff, a little bit, there is a bit of a freakish side, especially on the third track here, where we're getting like these howled vocals. It's like in the midst of the track, Famine is just turning into a werewolf. We get some female vocals kind of hopping in the tail end of this track, bringing a bit of beauty and refinement to the song. Peste Noire, and a lot of black metal, in my opinion, has always been about kind of the mix of beauty and ugly. And Famine most definitely does that with his own kind of style and approach, and I think that should be appreciated on this record. Now, toward the middle of this LP, with tracks like The Devil Exists and the title track, these are two of the longest tracks in the track listing here. I just wish maybe they were fleshed out with some more instrumentation, because there are moments here where things get a little redundant, especially when I guess the songs just lean a little bit heavier on the vocals. We're getting just kind of these shouted, angry vocals against these repetitive riffs and kind of drum patterns, or we're getting a little bit of spoken word. Maybe if you were a Frenchman or a native speaker, you might just be getting a bit more enjoyment out of these passages than me. I guess I'm just sort of missing that instrumental color that was so amazing on that 2011 album. Now, with the two finishing tracks in the track listing here, we get some more of that color, we get more of that folk instrumentation back, an awesome accordion solo, though at the very end of the final track here, we kind of get this strange falsetto gargling vocals that are just a tad too ridiculous. I just kind of giggled at them. However, I don't think Peste Noire's approach to black metal is supposed to be as legitimately frightening as some other artists' approach to black metal. Honestly, the way I see Famine toying with this genre, it just seems more like a really angry troll that's kind of shouting at you and covered in boils and very freaky and very scary, but, you know, still like, you know, kind of like a very homely troll. I just see Peste Noire as just more of a flamboyant approach to black metal, and I feel like with these last two albums, after such a colorful and exuberant album with the pure essence of garbage, now we're kind of getting just this plainer sound, this plainer approach. Though it's still decent, it's not quite as exciting, at least to me anyway. But, you know, let me know what you think. I'm feeling a decent 7 on this thing. Transition! If you've given this album a listen, what did you think of it? Did you love it? Did you freaking hate it? Why? What do you think I should review next? And that's it. Anthony Fantano, Peste Noire, forever!